I'm leaving this houses today.
Leaving your kids behind like that, you're the worst wife ever.
My mother-in-law, Susan, scolded me right up until the moment I said my farewell.
Off.
Seeing the kids burst out laughing, Susan probably thought they were on her side.
Even your own kids are laughing at you. How sad.
She looked at me with a smug grin. It's actually her who's pitiful. At that moment, Susan had no idea what was about to happen in the future. My name is Olivia, and I'm a 45-year-old stay-at-home mom. I live with my husband, Kevin, my daughter, Samantha, and my son, Sean. My kids were busy with their school clubs and part-time jobs, and Kevin worked late every night. As for me, I spent my days looking after the family as a stay-at-home mom, leading a busy but fulfilling life. That was until today. One day, my husband suddenly decided that his mom was going to move in with us. I knew Susan had been living alone in her old house since my father-in-law passed away. Kevin had always said he was worried about her, so that part didn't surprise me. But if we were going to live together, we should have talked about it as a family first. Why did you decide something so important like having your mom move in without consulting us? Shouldn't we have discussed it as a family ahead of time?
Just shut up. It's already decided. I can't just leave my mom alone at her old place.
Kevin never cared about my opinion from the start. He and his mom had already made her arrangements, and her house was sold without me having any say in it. They decided the moving date between the two of them, leaving me no room to intervene. And that was the start of my nightmare living with Susan.
Hey, Olivia, are you even cleaning every day? The place is pretty dusty, you know.
I'm sorry, I couldn't keep up this week. I've been really busy and couldn't get to every corner.
Excuses, really? You're a stay-at-home mom. There's no excuse for slacking off on housework.
Susan would catch even the slightest lapse in my housework and nag at me endlessly. I could never relax in my own home.
Must be nice being a stay-at-home mom, huh? You get to lounge around all day. You better be grateful to Kevin for bringing in the money.
Lounge around? Not at all. Ever since she moved in, I've barely had a moment's rest. I've been running around like crazy. The one lounging around is her. I know she never liked me from the start. Still, now that we were living together, wouldn't it be possible for her to compromise a little, even if she didn't like some things? I was at my wit's end with Susan's constant jabs, so I decided to talk to Kevin. Kevin, I need you to say something to Susan. She's been saying all sorts of things to me every day, and it's really taking a toll on me.
There's no way mom could be wrong about anything. You've probably just been slacking off anyway, right? You should be grateful that she's training you to be a proper housewife.
Kevin always had a bit of a mama's boy streak, but it got even worse once we started living with his mom. To him, whatever his mom said was always right. It was useless to talk to him about it. After that, Susan continued to leave all the housework to me, and if she didn't like something, she'd endlessly nag about it. If I tried to argue even a little, she'd make up stories and tell Kevin. During the day, I had to deal with her snide remarks, and at night, I got complaints from Kevin, who took her words at face value. I was completely exhausted. Still, I endured it because I was a stay-at-home mom. Before I got pregnant, I had worked full-time. But when I found out I was pregnant, I didn't feel confident I could balance work and childcare, so I quit my jobs. Since then, we've been living on Kevin's income alone, so I felt I had to endure everything, no matter how hard it got, for financial reasons. However, as the stress piled up day after day, I started to worry that I'd lose my sanity if this continued. If that's the case, maybe it would be better to just get my job. With that thought in mind, I began looking for work. I made sure to complete the housework perfectly so Susan wouldn't have anything to complain about. And in my free time, I started job hunting. It must have bothered her that she couldn't criticize my housework anymore. Now, she began to pick on me about my job search.
Oh my, out again today? What kind of housewife leaves the houses all the time, putting on makeup like that? Are you out looking for men or something?
That's just nonsense. I'm looking for a job so I can save money for the kids' future. So please stop making weird accusations.
Oh really? A real housewife would manage her husband's income wisely and save money that way. Honestly, Olivia, you're just a useless wife who can't handle finances properly.
She made it seem in front of my kids as if I were some kind of promiscuous mother. I've managed to deal with everything Susan threw at me, but even I had my limits. That night, I suggested we have a conversation with the three of us, me, Kevin, and Susan. During that conversation, I told Kevin that I had started looking for my job. I also expressed how hurtful it was that every time I went out, Susan accused me of looking for men. I hoped that, even though Kevin was a mama's boy, he would at least put his mom in her place. However, instead of scolding her, Kevin said something completely outrageous to me.
Mom has every reason to be suspicious. Frankly, I can't trust anything you say. If you really do start working, you're going to give 70% of your salary to Mom.
What? 70%? I couldn't believe my ears. Kevin didn't trust me at all. On top of that, demanding that I give 70% of my paycheck to his mom was absurd. When I tried to argue, Susan jumped in immediately.
You can do that, can't you? You need to prove to the kids that you're not out looking for men.
She said this with a smirk, looking straight at me. At that moment, I was absolutely furious with her, but I somehow managed to control myself and think rationally. If I argued now, Kevin wouldn't listen to me anyway. Even if most of my paycheck would be taken by Susan, it was still better to work outside than to stay home with her all day. The conversation between the three of us ended with me just listening to what Kevin and Susan had to say. I didn't even care anymore. Being with Susan was unbearable for me. A few days later, I started working part-time at a construction company. I couldn't work long hours since I had to make sure the housework was done perfectly, or else I'd never hear the end of it from Susan. Fortunately, there was a vacancy for an office position at a construction company relatively close to home, and I got the job. Working again after so long was tough, but it was also very rewarding. I felt a fulfillment I hadn't experienced as a stay-at-home mom, and I enjoyed every day. Of course, Susan wasn't happy to see me so full of life now that I was working. Her bullying got even worse when I was at home.
Have you been slacking off on cooking lately? Do you really think that's acceptable for a housewife?
I'm sorry, I haven't had much time. I'm doing my best to make proper meals, though.
You went out and got a job on your own, so stop complaining. Also, from now on, make a separate dinner for me. I want something lighter.
Understood. Her demands kept increasing, and I had no time to rest while I was at home. I'd come back from work and immediately be swamped with housework. No matter how hard I tried, her attacks on me never stopped. On top of that, most of my paycheck went to her. I finally got a job, but I may not be able to keep it up anymore. I felt I had reached my limit. I was physically and mentally exhausted. And then I found out Kevin was having an affair. It was the final blow to me, who was already worn out in every way. The other woman was a new employee at Kevin's company. When his affair was exposed, Kevin said something unbelievable without a hint of remorse.
Of course, a young and pretty girl is better than a worn-out old lady like you. You're useless now.
Instead of his apologizing, he insulted me. I couldn't take it anymore, and I screamed at him. "That's it. I'm divorcing you, and you better pay me alimony."
I'll pay you the damn alimony. Take the money and get out now.
I felt tears welling up at his cruel words, but I managed to hold them back just in time. Our kids were watching our ugly fight. I swallowed my tears and looked at them. They looked back at me with thoughtful eyes, as if they were trying to process everything. A few days later, Kevin and I got divorced. When it came time to decide whether they wanted to stay with me or Kevin, the kids chose to stay in the house. That meant I would be leaving on my own. Packing up for just one person didn't take long. I quickly gathered my things and got ready to leave. When I was leaving the house, I said my final goodbye to Susan. Thinking that I'd never have to see her again, I found myself surprisingly calm as I faced her. "Well then, thank you for everything. Even if it was a short while, please take care of my kids."
Honestly, leaving your kids behind like that, you're the worst wife ever. Kevin is really better off without you. The fact that the kids didn't choose you says it all.
Huff.
My kids, watching our exchange, couldn't hold back their laughter. Seeing their reaction, Susan seemed pleased and gave me a smug smile.
How sad. Even your kids are laughing at you.
I took my bags and left the house. Knowing that this was the last time she'd mock me made my steps feel much lighter. After that, I moved to an apartment near the company where I worked part-time. When I told my supervisor about my divorce and asked if I could extend my working hours, he appreciated my work and offered me a full-time position. Once I became a full-time employee, I threw myself completely into my work. When I was part-time, I barely managed to finish everything during work hours. But now, without having to worry about housework, I could help other employees, learn more, and work as much as I wanted. After about a month, I got a call from Susan on my phone. Wondering what she wanted after all this time, I answered, only to hear her pathetic, tearful voice.
Olivia, please come back now. I'm struggling so much, I feel like I'm going to collapse. The kids' schedules are all over the place with their activities and part-time jobs, so I have to cook multiple times a day. It's too much. They come back covered in dirt from their activities, and there's so much laundry to do. I'm going to get sick.
Isn't Kevin there with you? You're a family, so why don't you all help each other out?
That ungrateful son. Kevin is all caught up with some young girl from his office, and he barely comes home. He won't even answer when I call.
To be honest, I knew this would happen. Susan calling me because she couldn't handle taking care of the kids. It was all part of the kids' plan. They had seen me struggling under Susan's bullying for so long. Of course, they also knew how their dad always sided with her and only complained to me. When I decided to get my divorce, I naturally planned to take my kids with me. But they stopped me.
It's not right for you to be the only one suffering, Mom. Dad and Grandma need to learn their lesson.
Yeah, let them deal with the hardships for once.
Following the kids' plan, they intentionally stopped doing their usual chores. Normally, they were very helpful around the house, but to teach their dad and grandmother a lesson, they deliberately did nothing. Just as the kids expected, Susan gave up and reached out to me for help. According to them, things between her and Kevin were at their worst, and there were constant fights at home. As a result, Kevin no longer felt comfortable there and had almost stopped coming home. I almost burst out laughing while I was still on the phone with her. Everything had gone so perfectly according to plan. Serves her right.
Olivia, are you listening? So, when are you coming back?
I had been silent, lost in thoughts about the kid's plan, and she must have gotten anxious. She kept calling my name over and over. Well, since we're divorced, I'm basically a stranger now, right? Isn't it weird to ask a stranger to come back?
Well, I'll talk to Kevin, I promise. So please come back. Let's all live happily together again.
When I sighed and spoke, Susan tried to say something convenient for herself. When were we ever living happily together? Not even once. I'm busy, so I'm hanging up now. You all can sort things out as a family.
Wait, Olivia, don't hang up.
I cut her off and ended the call. After hanging up, I felt more refreshed than I ever had before. This must be what it feels like to finally have peace of mind. Not long after that, I got a call from my ex-husband. He must have made up his mind after being nagged by Susan. He asked me to take custody of the kids. This was the final step in our plan. I knew Kevin couldn't take care of the kids, so he would eventually turn to me. The kids were probably preparing to move in with me already. All right, I'll take custody of the kids. Let's go through the process of changing custody. Also, of course, you need to pay child support every month.
You! How dare you talk to me like that? No, I'm sorry. Please take care of the kids.
Kevin seemed irritated by my strong response, but he wasn't in a position to argue, so he had to apologize. It must have been humiliating for him to have to beg a favor from the woman he once looked down on. I felt a sense of satisfaction towards my ex-husband. All right, it's time to get ready to welcome my kids. With a bright heart, I hurried home. A few days later, my kids, Samantha and Sean, came to my place. Since both parties agreed to the custody change, it seemed like the paperwork would be done quickly, but the kids couldn't wait and came to my place ahead of time. When I searched for a new place after the divorce, I already knew I'd be taking the kids in eventually, so I rented a spacious house. Kevin wanted to end things with me as soon as possible, so he paid more alimony than usual. Thanks to that, I could afford the rent for a bigger house. As for what happened to Susan and Kevin afterward, it seemed Kevin had a rough time because of the woman he was seeing. Apparently, the woman was also dating another guy from the same department. Kevin got caught up in a love triangle at work, and things turned into a mess. Then it came out that the woman had stolen money from the company, and Kevin ended up being suspected as an accomplice. He must have taken all his frustrations and pent-up stress from work out on Susan. Unable to bear seeing her once proud son in such a miserable state, Susan lashed out at him. Kevin became mentally ill and started missing work often. Susan, in turn, kept blaming him even more, and their relationship turned toxic. You'd think that a mama's boy and his mom would enjoy living together, but it turned out to be quite an unexpected ending.
Mom, you're working late today, right? I'll make dinner.
I'm off practice today, so I'll help with dinner when I get back.
My kids called out to me as I was about to leave the house. Their kindness made me discreetly wipe my eyes. I used to be weak and just endured everything. Because of that, I went through a lot of unfair hardships. But I won't look back on the past anymore. I'm going to live strong for my kids. Thank you. I'm off. I waved slowly to my kids. With their smiles behind me, I stepped out the front door. The sky is clear again today. I looked up at the bright sun and walked forward with determined steps.